Yes. What is up, guys? Guys and gals. Welcome to another episode of Big Kid with Will Bryant. The show that makes you feel better about yourself by listening to somebody else worse than you talk about why he's worse than you for an hour to an hour and a half every week. I'm your host. I'm Will Bryant. And for those of you watching, my eyes are a little glassy right now, a little red, a little bit on the reddish side. Usually I put on eye drops before every episode because I usually smoke before every episode, but I ran out of eye drops. So I'm here looking like someone injected blood into both of my eye sockets for this episode. And I think it's apropos. That's smart for appropriate because I'm going to talk about basically nothing but drugs for this entire episode. I just kind of, after last week's episode, hangovers and K-holes, I believe that was last week, right? I thought it was apropos to perhaps visit the life of mine or revisit my life, not by periods of time, but by what drugs I've done. I'm wearing this jersey. It says Hellas, and it has number 34 on it. And if I turn around, y'all can see it is a Giannis Antetokounmpo Greek national jersey. There's a little Greek flag. My buddy Cole actually bought this in Greece for me. And I'm wearing it today for episode 34 of Big Kid with Will Bryant. I'm your host. I'm Will Bryant. So thank you, Cole. Thank you, Keith. There's still Bud Light here. Matches with the shirt or jersey. Beer. Does beer count as a drug? Some may say so. That would, I guess, be technically, I believe, the first thing that I did try in my life. And that's just, I think that's most people's, if they ever do endeavor in these vices. Who among us has not had a sip of a beer as a child at one of these family events or something like that? That's definitely my first memories of drinking a beer. And of course, first time we ever tasted, we're like, how in the world does anyone drink this like normally, like for like to the amounts that we witness our uncles drink? Like, wow. Even worse for the first time you ever try liquor. What like hard liquor? Do you remember the first time you ever tasted a hard liquor? I don't really remember it, but I remember that was one of the most confusing moments of my life. Like, how are you putting yourself through this? And like, that's good stuff. What? As a kid, you could have told me that's what you put in the car to make it go, and I would have been like, that makes sense. You use it to drive and to get drunk because it's that disgusting. That would have made sense to me. I remember one time I was visiting my my aunts and my aunt and uncle, and I went downstairs to their basement where my cousins were they lived in the basement like dudes. And I guess they had thrown a party like either the night before or that weekend or something, and there was a keg in the basement, and I remember just not again being young and not knowing how the hell a keg works at all, and so I just like put the nozzle up to my mouth and like just squeezed it, and I thought like I would be drinking some beer, nothing but like fucking gas and foam filled up my mouth, and I thought that was keg beer, and I was like, wow, how in the world would anybody ever put themselves through this? How's this any better? I'd seen kegs, in like a movie or two and been mystified by them, and my first experience with one, Jesus. See, these are all times that I tried beer, but I remember the first time I got drunk. It was not a classy event. Let's see, I was in high school. I'm trying to remember what grade was I in. Was I a sophomore? I might have been a junior. I think I was a junior at the time. I don't think I was a senior yet. And God, it might have been like this time of the year, maybe like September going on October, because it was a little bit colder. I remember us having to wear sweaters, maybe even jackets. I think maybe full blown jackets. It might have been winter. And the reason I'm remembering this is because, like dumbass kids, we had to drink outside because what establishment would allow underage kids like that to just stay in and drink? And plus, we couldn't afford a bar, so we went to a bodega, and I'm a Queens kid. I'm born and raised in Queens. Went to high school in Queens. So me and my Queens boys friends, my Queens kids, me and my dumb friends, we went to this bodega in Jackson Heights and bought some 40s. Old English. I remember. OE. We bought 40s of OE. Fucking, I think we were 15 or 16. And that 140, like we each had our own 40, man, it felt like it lasted us forever. And we got wasted. We were gone, man. In the future, I remember like buying, downing 240s with a friend and like talking about how, man, remember when one of these would get us destroyed and now we're doing two and we're kind of just fine. But yes, because I remember that first time we were so, like, I remember being drunk for the first time and just going like, oh, this is like so much fun. I remember that's when I also learned what breaking the seal was for the first time. And like there was one, it was basically all a couple of my high school buddies. And then we were hanging out with this one kid that we didn't normally hang out with. And he was definitely like, I don't want to say the bad kid, but like worse behaved than us, at least. Like we did like dumb stuff. He would do like illegal stuff, like that there's a difference there. So of course we were hanging out with this guy on the first time that we all got drunk like that. And of course he's the one that knew what bodega to go to get these 40s. And of course he's the one that suggested OE because he's the classiest of gentlemen. And I remember having to pee, and he was like, "Nah, I'm not gonna do it or whatever." And I go pee somewhere on the street, sidewalk, something. And like 5 minutes later, I'm like, "Oh man, I gotta pee again." And this guy, the bad boy, he's like, "See, that's what happens when you break the seal." And I was like, "What do you mean? What is this? What is break the seal?" And he's like, "When you get drunk or when you drink, if you once you pee for the first time, you basically like are gonna have to go throughout the entire night. And he was right, and I felt like I had just embarked on like the wisdom of a sage old wizard. Like, wow, this guy knows stuff. This guy, this bad boy knows some things. Man, I can learn from this guy as I'm fucking zipping my pants and sipping on some OE in the streets of Jackson Heights. Similarly, nailed it. I remember the first time getting too drunk, because that first time I got really drunk with my friends, but I don't remember clearly. Getting home, but I'm sure I did just fine because I got home with no issue. Later that night. However, there was a time recently, not recently, not too long after that first time, because what happened is now me and my group of dumbass friends that are still just children in high school, we've been exposed to this getting drunk, and we were like, oh man, we gotta do that again. And so we like made plans, like maybe a week or two later to do it again, and we bought the 40s, and I don't know what happened. Did I smoke that night? Because we haven't talked about weed yet, but I was smoking weed a little bit by this point. That might have been the first time that I got drunk and smoked weed at the same time. But part of me is remembering this as getting too drunk and like throwing up, and then being offered weed like as if it would help me, and maybe hitting it but it not helping me. So I don't remember if it was the first time that like weed got me fucked up on a drunken night or I was already fucked up. But point being, I remember throwing up right on the streets again of Jackson Heights. And this time, like, my buddies had to get home at a certain time, and I remember we had this one friend who's like was like terrified of his mom. She'd be like whip him with like a hanger. So he was like, nah, I gotta go. And literally this is what happened, and it makes my friend sound terrible. And the funny thing is, like, to this day, I'm still like best friends with one of these guys. But on this day, they left me, like they made me call my parents to tell them where I was, and they left me leaning against a parked car waiting for my parents as they went home, because they didn't want to get in trouble because it was too late. And they were also drunk too. But I was like too drunk to get home this time. And I was just standing, like leaning, fucked up against the car. And I remember my dad's car pulling up and my mom riding shotgun, and they get out, or my mom gets out, and I just get in the back seat or whatever. And I was like fucked up. And we get home, and I'm like too fucked up to even like go through a lecture or whatever. I just go like right to bed. And then the next day, I remember waking up, and like my mom wasn't even like really like talking about it or acknowledging it. Not really ignoring me outright, but definitely treating me like, like keeping me at a distance. But my dad had gone to work. My pops had already like been gone for this, so I didn't see him. And it felt like one of these wait till your father gets home moments. The only thing is, this is my stepdad, who is like the least paternal, like, type of dude. Like, if you meet him, you'd kind of understand what I mean. I'm not saying he's a bad guy at all. He's not like a sit you on your lap and be like, let me teach you some life lessons, son. No, I mean, like, I think I've mentioned this before. The sex talk for me was us watching a movie that had a sex scene in it, and he said, "You see that? Don't do that." And that was it. That's as much as we ever talked about sex and the dangers of it and whatever comes with it. So I was like, this is like it. This is the moment where he finally gives me that fucking talk or whatever, where he has to be like that paternal influence. And then so he comes home from work later that night. He didn't work regular hours, so it was later in the night. And I remember just being in my room, and he comes in, and he's not an intimidating presence in the slightest. Like, he's just not. So I wasn't afraid when he walked in, and he just goes, "So, you're pretty messed up last night, huh?" And I'm like, "Yep, yeah, it was." And he like smirks like, "Oh boy," and then like just walks out. That was it. That was it. I think we watched Monday Night Raw or something like that. I don't even know. Maybe there was some pay-per-view on Sunday. I have no idea, but I that was it. I remember my buddies like asked me like, "Yo, like, what happened? How bad in trouble did you get?" And I described that story to them, and they were like, "What the that does not make any sense." My friend that gets whipped with a wire hanger if he doesn't do the dishes immediately was looking at me like, "That's not fair." He wanted me to show up to school with like lacerations. Meanwhile, I walked in with like new sneakers or something. Probably, perhaps had there been slightly tougher consequences, I might not be recording a podcast where I go in detail about all the drugs that I've ever done and be on minute 18 and still not even gotten to a single drug yet. Speaking of things that are more vices than drugs, I mean, cigarettes. I used to steal those from my pops that I just mentioned. And at first, I vividly remember why. And dude, my pops used to smoke Winston's. Fucking Winston. Who smokes Winston besides cattle farmers? The hardest fucking non-menthol cigarette out there, Winston's. So my first cigarette ever was a Winston. And I remember why I tried it for the first time too. I don't think the first time. I definitely tried it for the first time just because it was there at home and nobody else was home, and like, I don't know, to be a boy alone at home with a pack of cigarettes, how could you not, right? So, and I remember taking a puff and being like, absolutely not. And I think I flushed it and then panicked for the next hour and a half about the smoke or whatever. But one memory that's very vivid in my mind that has to do with cigarettes is this is back when MTV was like all the rage for young teens and whatnot, and I saw a Snoop Dogg video, and he did this thing. I don't remember if it was him or if it was just someone else in his video, but there was a moment where someone blew smoke out of their mouth and inhaled it through their nose. And I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my young life. And I had to try it. I saw the pack of Winstons and I started practicing at home how to blow smoke. And that was like when I realized that like blowing out smoke and letting smoke float out of your mouth were two very different things. And that I was like, oh, the smoke floating out looks so cool. I was actually kind of nailing it, but man, I remember coughing so much. I'm kind of. Oh my god. I was about to say I'm kind of gagging right now, and then definitely just did. Just the thought of like fucking Winston smoke in my throat right now. Huh? All right. So of course I have to wash out my throat with some Bud Light. Yeah. So I actually did become a cigarette smoker for a while there. I think it was mostly just in the college years and right after. I think maybe there was about a good solid 3 years there that I smoked, and it's I kind of sometimes forget that I used to smoke cigarettes like that. My friends definitely do too. Like, oh yeah, you definitely were one of like the smokers. But so many of us quit. Now, now it's whatever. Weed though, weed I smoke every day to this day. I knew I was gonna be a pothead before I ever smoked weed. I don't know like how, I don't know what that means, but like it's the truth. I remember never having smoked weed, but knowing that I was probably going to like it and do it often. I don't know. I don't know if it was just me already realizing at a younger age that I had an addictive personality. At that time, I probably didn't partake in any real vices enough to have some type of addiction. I'm willing to admit that I am addicted to weed. Yeah. So, and there was a while there where I was addicted to cigarettes, and I've had other addictions as we'll get to. So I don't think I was addicted to anything at the time. So I didn't know that I had this type of personality, but maybe subconsciously I did because I knew that I was just going to be like a weed guy. And I remember the first time getting high again. This was before. God, was I in high school? I might have been in 8th grade actually. Yeah, because I was with all my like elementary school friends. So I don't know if I was a freshman in high school that was still hanging out with, the friends that I had. Because I went to the same school from kindergarten to 8th grade. So I knew a lot of those people for 9 years. Like we went to school together for 9 years. So there's a chance I was a freshman in high school and was hanging out with them. But I actually truly believe we were all in 8th grade. Except for my one buddy that got left back. He was in 7th grade, but still our age. And again, it was one of those situations where like the normal group of friends was hanging out with that one bad boy, and this guy was older than us. So probably in high school at the time, hanging out with a bunch of 8th graders. I think he was dating one of our friends at the time. We had that girl in our group of friends that was like always dating someone like a little bit older than her. So like when we're in 8th grade, a little bit older than her is like a freshman in high school. And we were like, whoa, he's in high school. And to me, like when I look back on that day, this dude had like a fucking 5 o'clock shadow and like, the hands of a plumber or something. But he probably looked like this derpy little fucking 14-year-old now that I think about it. But in my head, dude, he's like, I still remember him like, I don't know, like having like fucking like a beard or stubble or something. He probably just had like little peach fuzz on his face. and he was gonna be the one. He knew someone that had weed, and like we go. This was the weird part. We get the weed, and we. I think he has already like a Dutch because we did blunts back in the day. We do Dutches, and we didn't know. I thought it was gonna be an issue to find somewhere to smoke, but he said, "Nah, let's just go back to my crib." And mind you, like we're kids. None of us have a crib. We live with our parents or something like that. And he says, like we walk in, and like right before we walk in, he just says like, just ignore my mom, walk right past her. And we were all like, what the fuck? And we did just that. And it wasn't even that like he was ignoring his mom. It was that his mom didn't care. Cause he didn't ignore his mom. He was like said hi to her or whatever, but like was like not in like a nice, hey mom, how you doing? It was like they were roommates or something. And then he rolled the blunt, and we smoked like right within like the vicinity of his mother, kind of, which was so weird. But then we just got so. You know how some people say that they don't get high the first time they smoked? I was flying, dude. Rockin' man. I was so high, dude. And then it was like, I just remember thinking like I was right. I knew I would love this, and I am loving it. I remember leaving with my friend, and we were doing this thing where like neither one of us was admitting to the other that was our first time smoking. Until like at the end of the night or something, when we were just kind of like admitted to each other, like, yeah, no, I've never smoked before. And he was like, yeah, no, me neither. Like, I feel like we were pretending that, like, yeah, I smoked before, but you know, I took like a hit or whatever. Then we were just like, nah, I've never smoked. Yeah, I smoke pretty much every day. Nah, every day, yeah. Smoke weed every day. Not a big dabs or edible guy. Edibles just are not the same high, and they don't hit the same. Excuse me as I burp. I don't like the delayed effect of it. Really, sometimes they hit me and I'm like, oh, I forgot I even took that. I like smoking and getting high like while I'm smoking. Like I know what I'm doing. I'm taking this in, and it makes sense for me. Then we start moving on to, I think the first thing that I did outside of like the normal holy trinity there of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. My first dabble outside of that was, I believe it was mushrooms. And it was a pretty nice experience my first time. It was with a group of friends that we planned on doing it. We at this point I was already in my early 20s, you know, no more stupid young teenager. Now I'm just a stupid young 20 something. And I think I was I was home for the summer from college or whatever. And we decided to do shrooms at our friend's apartment in Bushwick. And she had like her own rooftop that we were like could chill on or whatever. So it was a very controlled environment. And I remember it just being really positive and awesome. And I've done a bunch of psychedelics since then. And like, knock on wood, I've never had a bad trip. I was afraid because being someone that had at that time already experienced a couple of years of depression and anxiety, I was nervous that shrooms would bring me to a darker place. The same reason why I was even more hesitant on doing acid, but we'll get to that. And that's usually the biggest reason that I hear people not want to try some type of psychedelic. It's because they feel like on a normal basis, on an everyday level, they are already in their head in too much in a negative way, in a negative capacity, whether it be some sort of anxiety or overthinking something or being too negative on themselves in general. And they feel like if they take a drug like mushrooms or acid or something like that, that it would, they would lose their ability to get themselves out of that and just fall deeper into it. And that was my fear too. And it's just not the case. It's just not the case in my experience. For me, what mushrooms did was eliminate those things. It does. I don't do this for later on in my life, but same thing for acid. And I'll tell that story when the time comes in this episode. But in my experience, I've just realized or noticed that these psychedelics work in a very therapeutic way for me, actually. Oftentimes doing shrooms or acid feels like a cleansing of sorts, emotionally. I don't want to say spiritually, but definitely emotionally. For some people, spiritually. I guess I don't allow myself to take it to that place too much. But the thing about mushrooms though is the actual mushroom form, not like how chocolate mushrooms are becoming very popular now, and you can kind of find those at every weed shop. Those are cool too. I don't mind those, although sometimes the potency like differs because I don't think there's any real regulation to that going on yet, since I'm pretty sure it's kind of illegal. But I'll do another one. Fuck it. When I have had multiple occasions where I do classic shrooms, the disgusting tasting ones, and it's not so much from the taste of it, but something about it always makes me some type of sick. I don't want to say always, because the first time I did it, it did not happen. I don't remember throwing up the first time I ever did shrooms, but there have been a number of occasions where minutes, just a couple of minutes really, after I'll do shrooms, within the hour for sure, I'll like throw up, and I'm trying my best not to because I don't want to waste the shrooms. And I just try to, oftentimes if there is more, I just end up taking more. And the last time I did like real shrooms, I remember going to the bathroom and just kind of crapping my brains out early on, like within the first hour. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst trip ever. And not even because of a psychological thing, but because of a fucking stomach thing. And thankfully, after that, actually it was a vomit and a crap. After that, I didn't feel that sick anymore and felt pretty awesome for the rest of the night. And then it was funny, like the next day, I said that out loud. I was like, dude, I don't know, but shrooms, they fucked me up. Like I had to go throw up, and then I had to fucking destroy that bathroom a little bit. And then one by one, everyone else started admitting that they also took a massive shit at one point throughout the night because of the shrooms. And I was like, oh, you motherfuckers, you're just not gonna say anything about that. Like I was the brave one that came out first. There was one time that we took shrooms at my friend's house in our apartment in Sunnyside, and we took them at her apartment, like a bunch of us, like a group of like fucking maybe 10 of us. So stupid. So story starting so dumb already. Here's where it gets dumber. We took the shrooms and then immediately left her apartment to take the train to Central Park. That's right. We allowed the shrooms to kick while we were on the MTA subway system in New York City. All of us started tripping balls while waiting for the 7 train to get into the city. I had one friend that was staring at my other friend. Cole had his phone out, and all my friend could say, I'll say a version of it. All he could say was my interpretation of what he said that day. He just kept looking at him, and he said, Cole in his phone. Cole in his phone. And I was like standing in front of my friend, looking down the train, looking down the subway, and Cole had his phone out. That's all. And my friend kept saying, Cole in his phone. Cole in his phone. Cole on his phone. Just repeatedly, just cracking up. That's it. Nothing. He to this day, he doesn't know why that fucking cracked him up. Me and two other of my friends remember being annoyed by pretty much every other friend in our group when we were in Central Park. So we literally abandoned them and walked away. We left them in Central Park and we decided to walk to Times Square, peaking on shrooms. We went to the most populated place, like on the East Coast, and one of the most fucking populated and bright places in the world. At one point, I remember sitting down for a while because Times Square had just put in those like some tables and chairs on the street, and there was this big electronic billboard behind me, and it would change colors, and like I remember like it would go red, and I would get like more animated, and it would go blue, and I would get calmed down. But it was behind me, so I just saw the colors like emanate in front of me. And my friend was laughing. She's like, the colors I feel like they're controlling your mood. And I was like, holy shit, I think they are. Let's move from here. We went to Toys R Us, the Times Square location that's shut down now, but it was like 3 or 4 floors. And they had a life-size Tyrannosaurus Rex from Jurassic Park there. And I remember just standing in front of it as that T-Rex would just yell in my face. The Nintendo Wii, I believe, had just come out. And they had this little gaming station area where they set up Mario on a Wii. And I was playing it, but I was too fucked up to even play, so I just gave it to like some kid. And I saw my friends like sitting on the floor, just like watching the projector that was playing the Mario Wii. So I went over and I sat next to them. And so we're sitting on the floor and we're just watching Mario, the video game, on the projector. And I remember my friend, she goes, she's staring at the wall. And she's like, Will, are those lights like projected onto the wall, or is that like LED coming from the wall? And I was like, I don't know. I'll just go find out. And so I crawled on the floor of Toys R Us all the way to the wall, rubbed it with my hand, and crawled all the way back. And then sat down next to my friends again, and I was like, that's not an LED or a light. It's just a wall. Like, lights are being projected onto it. And she's like, oh, okay. And then we looked around and realized that nobody else was sitting. And we were just 3 idiots sitting on the floor of Toys R Us. And I was one idiot that just for no reason crawled across a Toys R Us floor, rubbed the wall, and crawled back. At that point, we were like, maybe we should go. I don't remember exactly what we did after that, but I do remember we ended up just going back to our friend's place in Sunnyside, at which point our friends contacted us and they met us at the apartment as well. So we all rendezvoused back at the Sunnyside place. At which point I heard one of the craziest stories that I had ever heard. Probably to this day. And I hope I don't butcher this story. And I hope to get this story on this podcast from a first-person perspective when I have one of my friends as a guest at some point. But for now, I hope my story will do, or my version of it at least. But they told us how they were in the park. Now, I have to give you some details about when this took place. See, this was a hot August summer day that we did shrooms in Sunnyside, took a train into the city, split up, and eventually met back in Sunnyside. August in Central Park, and my friends are telling me they're walking around on this summer day. This is after me and my two friends had abandoned them and gone to Times Square. Much better idea. They were walking around Central Park. A bunch of annoying stuff happened to them too, because there was one person that was really high. And at one point on this August day, they came across this area that had snow. And they didn't know if they were tripping so ridiculously bad or if they actually found snow in August at Central Park. And they all started having to like prove it to each other. So they started walking around in the snow, picking it up. I think maybe someone did a snow angel in one. They were throwing it at each other. They were laughing it up, having the time of their life, playing in the snow in August. And that's when one of them realized the signs everywhere. Active movie set. Do not touch. There might have even been some like producer or something on set yelling at them to get off the set. And they did not know what was going on. A bunch of stupid fucking kids on shrooms just fucking up your winter scene in this movie. Oh man. I remember that. See, now we're getting to some harder things. Because in college, that was the first time that I messed with cocaine. And that wasn't one of those things that, one of those moments where I knew I would like it before I tried it. No, I wasn't sure what it was, really. And I remember the first time I did it being very surprised at how it actually felt. It was like one weekend. I dormed at Stony Brook, and one weekend I was there. I mean, a lot of kids went home on the weekends to Stony Brook because it was just right out in Long Island, and you can take a quick LIRR right back into Queens and Manhattan and Brooklyn. So there were a lot of kids that, even though they dormed there Monday through like Thursday or Friday, if they had a Friday class, they'd go home, and I dormed for a reason, and I didn't want to like go home every weekend. To me, that was not really the experience that I wanted or signed up for. So I would rarely go home. And so a lot of weekends, a bunch of your friends would be gone and you hang out with like a different crowd or different crew. And I remember this one night, it was like me and my roommate or one of my suite mates, because I lived with like 5 or 6 other people that year. We were hanging out with someone that we like maybe wouldn't have normally hung out with in a normal day or whatever, or night. Always that one person that's like not a part of your group when you try a new drug, huh? There's a pattern going on here. Hanging out with someone that we don't normally hang out with. We get drunk. Hanging out with someone we don't normally hang out with, we smoke weed. Hanging out with someone we don't normally hang out with, doing cocaine, And this guy was a cokehead, and we were down to try it for the first time, and we were like surprised at the feeling, and I expected more like of a haziness, and was very surprised that it's more of a clarity effect type of feeling. I didn't really know about the talking. I didn't know that cocaine essentially made you want to talk forever about everything. I had no idea about that. And that's what we did that night. We talked about everything forever. We were like, this is one of the greatest conversations we've ever had, bro. Talking about music, talking about life, whatever. And of course, at some point in the night, we were like, we need more cocaine. Also a valuable lesson I learned the very first time I ever did cocaine: you never buy enough cocaine. It just never happens. I've never figured out the perfect mathematical equation for the perfect amount of cocaine. It's never happened. Because every time I get to that number, I realize, fuck, I want more. It's just, it's one of those unsolvable mysteries of life. It's impossible to buy enough cocaine. Just, unless you're a cocaine dealer and you're selling it, you will never have the right amount. See, I did it and I loved it. And it's true what they say. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Here's the thing. It's also an expensive drug. I realized how much money we were spending that night and how fast it was going. And how if I would have spent that same amount of money on weed, how much longer that weed would have lasted me. But there I was doing cocaine and falling in love with it. I guess, saving grace for me was that pretty early on in my cocaine career, because from the moment I did it pretty regularly for, I'd say, the next 2.5 years maybe. But something happened pretty quickly with me physically, where after one of these coke binges on a night, my nose would take way longer to recover than all of my friends. Like, I'd be hanging out with the same group of friends that I just did blow with the night before, the week before, and they'll all be fine, and I'm destroyed. Like, my nose would be ridiculously clogged, and with my inability, I mean no breathing through the nose, just pure runniness. And what happens is then you sleep and have to breathe through your mouth because you can't breathe through your nose. And then you wake up with a sore throat, and now your throat and your nose are fucked up. And I would almost always end up getting truly sick after one of these like coke binges. So although I had as much fun on coke with my friends, I felt like it wasn't fair, like through no fault of their own, but it wasn't fair that I had to pay a higher price for it afterwards. So it just got to the point where I stopped. I didn't stop until, I kind of hit, I guess, my version of rock bottom, and I wasn't there quite yet because It was while I was in college also that on one of these weekends where all of my friends had gone home, I hung out with like a brand new crowd and I was exposed to OxyContin for the first time ever. And that was a high that I had never experienced before in my entire life. And it's a high. Now, see, I went on to do. I was able to buy some more OxyContin from this guy for a little bit of a while there, but it was pricey. Um, Probably the priciest drug that I had done. It's probably ever, and easily. Like the moment that I got high, I knew why people would be addicted to this. I understood why immediately because it felt amazing. I remember just like laying down and just kind of like moving around, and I used to get like itchy on it, but like I didn't care. That was what really kind of messed me up. And so I had this time in college where I was smoking weed all the time, messing around with coke pretty often, pretty much every weekend, and painkillers were mixed in there too. And that was draining a lot of money. That was draining a lot of time. And that I kind of fell into, I was plus also battling insomnia at that point. My roommate Keith would often tell me that he would go to sleep and wake up and see me in the same exact position watching TV or playing PlayStation or something or Xbox at the time. And just wonder if I stayed like that for like 8 hours, and I'd be like, yeah. Yeah, I was definitely kind of spiraling at that point in my from like I'd say 20 to 21 was really rough because I remember learning that I failed out of college maybe 5 or 6 days before my 21st birthday. That was probably the lowest point of my life, was just wasting so much of my parents' money going to college and pretty much just using it as an avenue to waste my money and my time and my energy on doing a lot of drugs and partying too much. It was at this time in my life that I dropped. Yep, there's a delivery at the door. Great. It was at. So. It was at this point in my life that I dropped from 225 pounds down to about 155 pounds. Now they're ringing my doorbell. And that's why I always tell people, like, I didn't lose the weight in a healthy way. People like see pictures of me before and look at me now and they're like, oh, good for you. You know, like, yeah, I didn't lose it in a healthy way. Lost it doing a lot of drugs and not going to sleep. It's like when they hear I don't do cocaine or, oh, good for you. No, I don't do it because my nose can't really handle it, you know? So I remember when I went home from when I got kicked out from college, my mom thought that like I was sick from all the weight that I had lost. My family was really weirded out because it was like in one semester, kind of, you know, losing, what is that, 50, 60 pounds? It was within 1 year, but probably half a year. That's how unhealthy of a life I was living. once I got kicked out of college, that was the last. I don't think I ever did painkillers again. I might have done like I think I did like a Klonopin once or something like after that, but yeah, I didn't really fuck with painkillers again. I dabbled with cocaine a couple more times after that, but always with bad results. Great nights with terrible mornings and weeks after that, weekends and days after that. So it's just not worth it for me. So I don't do it anymore. I was lucky that I guess was able to stop doing painkillers the way that I was. I think it was partly also just a combination of not having access to it and money for it. Because I mean, dude, let me tell you, if I would have just came across a bottle of them, I would have probably stolen them at that time. Yeah, I remember at one time I told a friend that I didn't really hang out with often, but I told him that I loved Oxy, and he was like, dude, that's like fucking heroin. And I had, it was the first time I heard that, and it, you know, how right he was. Because essentially, it's what we've learned now is that this whole um, epidemic is legalized heroin. Speaking of, I once had a friend that did powdered heroin, and he knew that I loved or used to have an affection for painkillers, and at that point in my life, I had not done them anymore. And he straight up told me, dude, you would love heroin. It's like better than Oxy and way cheaper. And I remember telling him at that exact moment, I said, dude, as my friend, never give me your contact's information no matter what I say from any point here on. And he like was like, deal, like no problem. And I guess to my credit, I never asked him about it. Looking back at it, that's kind of a crazy moment for a friend to be like, hey, you would love heroin. He didn't say you should try it. He just was honest with me. Like, you know, I know you and you would love it. I'll watch The Wire and see Bubbles like injecting heroin into himself, and I'll be like, that looks like it's probably an amazing feeling right now. It was around this time in my life where I like had gotten kicked out of college, not doing cocaine anymore, not doing legalized heroin anymore, still smoking, not really a drinker like that, but I never liked liquor back in the day. Hard to believe, I think. I remember we were hanging out, me and my friends were hanging out with this other friend of ours in his basement, and he had ketamine. And that was the first time I ever saw that. And I'm pretty sure I have this trend in my life where if I see a drug for the first time, that's also probably the first time I did a drug. But anyways, I remember doing K, and like I told myself, well, it's not coke, so let's see if it affects my nose any differently. It did. It wasn't as bad. Excuse me. But I remember thinking, wow, this is the complete opposite feeling of coke. I guess just because of its look, I thought it'd be similar. And when I felt the complete opposite, I was like, I don't think this is for me. Yeah, I probably did another line or two or something like that. But at that point, I don't think I was ready for K. Because I did end up doing K way more later on in my life. As I talked about in the last episode, hangovers and K-holes. See, doing K is, I don't know, I think it's very different if you're drinking a little bit, but definitely if you're, at some type of like club environment or festival. I've gotten to the point now with K where I'll still do it, but it's not really my favorite drug. I know people that like that they love it. Kitty, I love Kitty, as the kids call it. It's for me. It's I'd rather be, I guess, more aware and energetic than down and groggy. Although, I do it all. I guess that's why later on, a little bit later on, once I finally started being, or was exposed to like the electronic music scene, that really shifted and changed my drug usage for sure. Molly. The first time I did Molly, I was like, all right, this is fucking awesome. Now we're getting somewhere, man. Fuck, like cocaine, I get it, it's awesome, but I can't do it, man. Painkillers, not too much. Gonna fuck up my life, man. Fuck that shit. Heroin, don't even come to me with that shit. K, I don't want to fucking feel like I'm sinking. Someone gave me Molly, and I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Let's do it, and I did. I think the first time I ever did Molly was my first attempt at going to a rave, and I say attempt because this is what happened. Me and my friends